What if one of the oldest civilizations on Earth did not imagine the gods as wise and distant creators, but as volatile rulers, competing powers, and beings who made humanity for labor? What if the first great urban civilization did not see human life as sacred, but as useful? Tonight, we leave behind the familiar stars, the usual legends, and the cleaner mythologies of later civilizations. We descend into something older, darker, a world written on broken clay tablets, buried beneath the dust of Mesopotamia, a world where heaven and earth had to be torn apart, where humans were shaped from mud and divine blood, where civilization itself was stolen from a god, and where even the most powerful goddess could not enter the underworld without being stripped, judged, and killed. This is the world of Sumer, and the deeper you go into it, the less it feels like myth in the modern sense, and the more it feels like a memory of how terrifying the universe once seemed. Welcome to Unmarked Sky. In the Sumerian imagination, the beginning of existence was not light, order, or beauty. It was water, a boundless, undifferentiated deep, a primal sea known as Namu. Before there was sky, before there was earth, before time could even be measured, everything existed within this dark primordial vastness. Namu was not merely a goddess in the later, simplified sense. She was the source, the matrix from which all things emerged. From this original abyss came the first divine beings, and the sky god and Ki, the earth goddess. They were the first divine polarity, heaven and earth still joined together, pressed into a world with no space, no separation, no room for life to unfold. Then came Enlil, and with him the first violent act of cosmic order. Enlil separated heaven from earth. He drove an upward. He fixed Ki below, and in doing so, he created the structure of the world. This is the first important thing to understand about Sumerian myth. Creation is not peaceful. It is not spoken gently into being. It is forced into shape. Order begins with division, and that violent beginning never really disappears from the logic of the Sumerian universe. Because in this worldview, the world is stable only because immense powers continue to hold it in place. The Sumerians did not imagine the cosmos the way we do now. They did not picture a universe of galaxies, vacuum, and infinite space. Their world was more enclosed, more intimate, and in many ways more unsettling. The human world existed between layers. Above was the heaven of the gods. Below was the deep earth and the realm of the dead. The land of the living was not the center of reality. It was the vulnerable middle. Beneath it lay Kur, the underworld, a place not of moral judgment in the later religious sense, but of shadow, dust, darkness, and irreversible descent. The ruler of this realm was Ereshkigal, the queen of the dead. This is another striking feature of Sumerian mythology. The afterlife is not rewarding. It is not transcendent. It is not paradise. Death means entering a diminished state, a bleak continuation in a place far removed from sunlight and divine favor. And that atmosphere matters because it shapes the emotional tone of everything else in the mythology. This is not a world built around comfort. It is a world built around survival inside a cosmic order that is powerful, unstable, and often indifferent. The Sumerian explanation for human origins is one of the most unsettling in the ancient world. In this myth, human beings are not the cherished children of the gods. They are not created out of love. They are not placed at the center of creation. They are made because the gods are tired. After heaven and earth were separated, the younger gods, often grouped under the larger divine order we now call the Anunnaki, were tasked with maintaining the world. They dug canals, raised embankments, shaped the land, built the conditions for civilization, but the labor was relentless, and eventually they rebelled. They complained, refused their burdens, and the crisis reached the attention of Enki, the god of wisdom, craft, cunning, and subterranean waters. Enki is one of the most complex figures in Sumerian myth. Where Anzio is associated with authority and command, Enki is associated with intelligence, problem solving, and creative intervention. Faced with divine unrest, Enki proposed a solution: create another species to do the work. Together with the mother goddess, often identified in related traditions as Ninhursag, he shaped the first human form out of clay. But clay alone was not enough. A body without life is only a vessel. So the gods made a further decision. A divine being was sacrificed, and that god's blood was mixed into the clay. That detail is unforgettable because it means the human being in this myth is made from two things: earth and divine death, mud and blood, servitude and stolen divinity. The result is a creature designed to work, but carrying inside itself a trace of godhood. That contradiction lies at the center of the Sumerian human condition. Human beings are lowly, but they are not nothing. They are subordinate, but not empty. Something dangerous is already in them, and that tension between obedience and divine residue haunts the rest of the mythology. If you want to understand the emotional logic of the Sumerian world, you have to understand the contrast between Enlil and Enki. Enlil is power, authority, kingship, order through command. He is often the divine force that establishes structure, but also the one most willing to enforce hierarchy ruthlessly. Enki is something else entirely. He is a creator, but also a sympathizer, a strategist, a trickster, a benefactor, though never a simple one. Again and again, Sumerian stories place these two gods on different sides of the human problem. Enlil tends to see humanity as troublesome, noisy, and unstable. Enki tends to preserve, protect, or intervene. This contrast becomes especially important in one of the oldest flood stories on Earth, because long before Noah entered later tradition, Mesopotamia was already telling the story of a world nearly wiped clean by divine decision. In the Sumerian version of the flood, the catastrophe does not happen because nature becomes violent on its own. It happens because the gods decide that humanity has become intolerable. One tradition says humans had multiplied too greatly. Another says their noise disturbed the divine order. Either way, Enlil resolves to wipe them out. The method is flood, a total flood, a reset of the world. But once again, Enki refuses to let the story end there. Unable or unwilling to openly challenge the divine decree, he instead warns a righteous ruler, often rendered as Zushudra in the Sumerian tradition. Through indirect speech or dreamlike revelation, Enki instructs him to build a great vessel, to prepare, to preserve life, to gather family, craftsmen, animals, continuity itself. Then the waters come. For days the storm rages. The world is swallowed. Even the gods, in some versions, fear the scale of what has been unleashed. And when the flood finally ends, what remains is not triumph. It is devastation. This ancient flood story is remarkable, not only because it predates the biblical version, but because it reveals how the Sumerians understood existence itself. Humanity survives not because it is beloved, but because one god chose to intervene against another's destruction. Life continues, but precariously, always under judgment, always under threat. The flood does not reassure the listener. It warns them. You survive only because powers above you did not quite agree to let you die. If the story of human origin explains why we exist, the story of the me explains why civilization exists. The me are difficult to translate cleanly. They are often described as divine decrees, sacred powers, civilizational principles, or the fundamental templates that make culture possible. Kingship, priesthood, law, writing, weapons, ritual, memory. These are not merely ideas in the abstract. In Sumerian thought, they are real powers, things that can be held, transferred, guarded, and stolen. And at first, they belong to Enki. He keeps them in the deep, in the hidden domain of wisdom and subterranean power. But there is another divine figure who refuses to accept a secondary role. Inanna. She is one of the most dazzling and dangerous goddesses in all ancient mythology. She is associated with love, beauty, desire, fertility, power, war, and political ambition. She is not passive. She does not wait to be chosen. She wants dominion, and to achieve it, she goes to Enki. What follows is one of the great scenes in ancient myth. There is feasting, there is drinking, there is charm, timing, calculation. And in his intoxicated state, Enki hands over the meat to Inanna. She takes them, loads them onto her vessel, and flees. When Enki realizes what has happened, he is furious. He sends messengers, monstrous forces, pursuers, but Inanna escapes them all and brings the meat back to Uruk. With that, Uruk becomes the center of civilization. This myth is extraordinary because it tells us something subtle but profound. Civilization is not portrayed as a natural human achievement, nor even as a generous divine gift. It is stolen, taken through cunning, brought into the human realm through conflict among the gods. So once again, the Sumerian worldview resists innocence. The foundations of human life, our order, our law, our writing, our authority, come wrapped in tension, theft, and risk. Civilization itself is unstable because its source was unstable. If there is one Sumerian story that feels both psychologically modern and cosmically ancient, it is Inanna's descent to the underworld. It begins with her decision to enter the realm of her sister, Ereshkigal. Why she goes varies across interpretations. Some say ambition, some say confrontation, some say she goes in relation to death, loss, or power. What matters is this: she enters a place where no one enters lightly. Before the journey, Inanna dresses in 7 sacred items, objects that embody her status, her force, her identity. And she instructs her servant that if she does not return, help must be sought. Then she descends. At each of the 7 gates of the underworld, she is forced to surrender one item: a crown, jewelry, insignia, power. By the time she reaches the deepest chamber, she has been stripped of everything. This is important. The goddess of desire, war, and sovereignty cannot carry her authority intact into the land of death. At the center of the underworld, she faces judgment, and she dies. Her corpse is hung up. Life above begins to fail. Fertility recedes. The world feels the absence. Only after appeals and intervention, again involving Enki's cunning, is a path opened for her restoration. But the laws of the underworld do not permit simple escape. A substitute must be found, and that leads to one of the coldest moments in ancient mythology. When Inanna returns and finds her husband, Dumuzi, not in mourning, but seated in splendor, she gives him over. He is taken in her place. The myth is cruel, but that cruelty is part of its force. This is not a moral fable in the later sentimental sense. It is a drama of power, death, exchange, and cosmic law. No one passes through death untouched, not even a goddess. The descent of Inanna reveals something essential about the Sumerian imagination. Life and death are not opposites. They are a cycle of exchange. Season follows season. Fertility yields to barrenness. Presence becomes absence. And return always carries a cost. Even divine life is conditional. That idea gives the mythology a very different texture from later traditions that emphasize moral salvation or transcendence. The Sumerian world is transactional, structured, bound by laws older than individual desire. You may bend them, delay them, trick your way around them for a time, but you do not abolish them. And because of that, Sumerian myth feels at once mythic and brutally realistic. Power exists, but power is never free. Wisdom exists, but it does not guarantee mercy. Love exists, but it does not protect you from descent. The world of Sumer is not populated only by gods. It is also filled with hostile beings, wandering spirits, harmful presences, and creatures of dread. This is where the mythology becomes especially disturbing, because in Sumerian thought, the cosmos is not neatly divided between good and evil in the later theological sense. Instead, it is crowded, dangerous, filled with forces that can wound, infect, possess, threaten childbirth, stalk the vulnerable, or disturb the living through the dead. Among the most feared of these beings is Lamashtu. She is not simply a ghost or a demon in vague form. She is vividly imagined, predatory, monstrous, associated with terror, directed at pregnant women, mothers, and infants. In later Mesopotamian tradition, she becomes one of the clearest embodiments of maternal nightmare, disease in childbirth, infant death, night terrors, unseen attack. For people living in the ancient world, where childbirth was dangerous and infant mortality was tragically common, such figures were not abstract. They explained catastrophe. They gave shape to fear. And in one of the strangest turns in Mesopotamian religion, protection against Lamashtu could be sought through another terrifying being, Pazuzu. Yes, the same name that would become infamous in modern horror. But with much older roots, Pazuzu is no gentle guardian. He is terrifying in form and force, and yet he could serve as a protective counterpower. This is the logic of apotropaic religion at its most ancient and unsettling. Sometimes the only thing that can drive away one terror is a greater terror. That tells us something profound about the emotional structure of the Sumerian world. Safety was not found by eliminating the monstrous. It was found by negotiating with it. Beyond named demonic figures, the Sumerians also feared restless dead, malignant spirits, and unresolved presences. If burial rites were neglected, if the dead were not properly handled, or if some imbalance remained, the spirit might linger. And a lingering spirit was not merely sad. It was dangerous. Illness, nightmares, misfortune, mental disturbance, all could be linked to spiritual intrusion. This is why Sumerian civilization developed not only temples and kingship, but also a dense ritual culture. Incantations, protective amulets, offerings, appeasement rites, exorcistic formulae. Daily life was not lived inside a neutral universe. It was lived inside a charged and unstable one. You negotiated with the visible world, water, crops, kings, cities, while also defending yourself against the invisible. And perhaps that is one reason Sumerian civilization became so disciplined. Because if the cosmos itself feels precarious, ritual becomes survival, order becomes sacred, writing becomes more than communication. It becomes memory against chaos. When people think of early civilization, they often imagine progress in simple terms: agriculture, cities, writing, law. And yes, Sumer gave the world all of those things. Some of the earliest cities, some of the earliest writing, administrative systems, temple economies, early law and kingship. But what makes Sumer unforgettable is not just its innovations. It is the worldview attached to them. This is a civilization that rose to remarkable sophistication while imagining the universe as fundamentally unstable and morally ambiguous. Its gods are powerful, but not always benevolent. Its humans are necessary, but not honored. Its civilization is brilliant, but born from divine conflict. Its afterlife is bleak. Its demons are intimate. Its greatest myths do not flatter humanity, they expose it. And yet, the Sumerians did not collapse into despair. They built, they irrigated, measured, recorded, governed, observed the heavens. Maybe that is the deepest lesson hidden in their mythology. That civilization is not born because the world is safe. It is born because the world is not. By the time we reach the end of the Sumerian world, what remains is not just a collection of strange stories. It is a complete vision of existence, a universe born from separation, a humanity made from clay and divine blood, a world governed by powers that are brilliant, dangerous, jealous, creative, and unpredictable, a civilization that understood itself not as the center of reality, but as something fragile caught between gods above, the dead below, and chaos always waiting at the edges. And yet, from that vision came writing, law, cities, astronomy, administration, the architecture of civilization itself. That is what makes Sumer so difficult to forget. Its myths are dark, but they are not empty. They preserve a memory of what it feels like to build meaning in a world that does not guarantee it. Maybe that is why these broken clay tablets still feel alive. Because even now, beneath all the dust, the Sumerians are still asking the same question we ask in quieter and more modern ways. What kind of world is this, really? And what does it mean that we were made to survive inside it? This is Unmarked Sky.